me start by welcoming everybody. We're in a kind of interesting dynamic here, and that is our panel is literally sitting in the Carter School in room 5000. I am 5,000 miles away. I'm in York in England. So we sort of had to do this kind of in a weird virtual way. But the focus will be on our two panelists, as it should be. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick off the session. And I know there will be people as we go forward, but we have a little over an hour and 15 minutes. So I want to give as much time to our two fellows, our panelists, as I can. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and I'm going to do a bit of a long introduction, and I'll tell you why after I've done so. Because who they are and what they're doing and what they're bringing to the Carter School is really an important part of what I want all of us to focus on during this session. So to begin, Lina Guerrero-Zarco is a fellow from Colombia. She's from Bogota. And Lujain Supi is a fellow from Jerusalem, from Palestine and Israel. And the two of them are IREX Fellows. They are here on 4-month fellowships in which the United States State Department has funded them to come to the United States in order to strengthen the work that they're doing in their respective communities in Colombia and in Jerusalem. They are professionals. They are professionals who work in conflict-affected societies, and what they do, as we'll discuss, contributes to the reduction of conflict, the improvement of the lives of people they work with, and they fit in the work they do into a larger conflict context. But they're not working at the political level or the national level. They work on the ground and are engaging with everyday people. And so that's the lens, the level of analysis that I want us to keep in mind as we engage in this session. They are here at the Carter School for a 4-month fellowship through the end of November. What they're doing here is they are strengthening the tools and the strategies and the approaches to the work that they do, so that when they return to their communities, they can be more effective. Not more effective in the sense that we're going to provide them with answers. It's that we're providing them with a space and an opportunity to meet people and spend time thinking about how they can, in effect, be as effective as possible. And what this fellowship actually asks of them is that they come here for 4 months and then they go back and work on implementing a project that they will be developing during their time here. So they both contribute to the work of the Carter School and also engage in the broader sort of discussion, strategizing about how they can effectively engage the people that they work with to achieve their goals. And they will talk more specifically about what they want to achieve. So Lina Guerrero Zarco, as I mentioned, is from Colombia. She is and has been a capacity development advisor for Conectando Caminos por los Derechos Pact in Colombia. In doing that work, she has strengthened the capacities of more than 18 civil society organizations working to promote social cohesion and prevent the violation of human rights. As I said, Lina is a professional. She's been doing this for a number of years. She has designed and led the implementation of a capacity building strategy to strengthen the organizational, technical, and advocacy capacities of civil society organizations in Colombia, particularly those who are working with migrant and refugee populations, increasingly those who are coming into Colombia from Venezuela. She works with returnees, and she works with host communities, communities that are affected by the rise in migration and refugees. Her work has specifically focused on promoting sustainable collaboration between civil society organizations and the Colombian authorities, particularly local authorities, in order to prevent, protect, and respond to human rights violations, in particular gender-based violence and human trafficking. And she's done work to help strengthen civil society organizations, both organizationally, but in the advocacy work that they do. And so a lot of what she's engaged in is not what we would say is direct conflict resolution and peace building, but it's advocacy work on behalf of people that have been affected by or have been victimized by violence and conflict. So in essence, she's done other work where she worked with the Diocese of Tibu. She worked to support 8 rural communities and strengthening advocacy and development strategies and preventing gender-based violence. Lina holds a master's degree in interdisciplinary studies on development from the Universidad de los Andes in Bogota. Her colleague, our other fellow, Lujane Subhi, also works as a professional on the ground with communities affected by conflict. Lujane is the coordinator of the Family First program in Jerusalem for a broader social welfare agency called Pamonim. She's worked for Pamonim for almost 4 years, and the past 3 years as the coordinator of the Family First program. Her responsibilities include implementing Pamonim's poverty awareness paradigm and its Family First program. And she's done so in 6 social service centers in East Jerusalem. Lujane also manages and promotes partnerships with the Jerusalem municipality and with other social service agencies in the region. She has planned and implemented training of the staff that she works with and that work with her. She has mediated between the needs of the field and the needs of district offices. And previously, as a family assistant, she often provided services to Palestinian families living in poverty including assistance with education, employment, and advocating for their rights. She would often accompany families in need to service sites. She has worked to map community services in order to provide for families in poverty, map the needs of families, and the adjusted services to meet those needs. She has also worked as a community developer and a project organizer for the Beit Safaf Women's Society, and has an undergraduate degree in Spanish and Latin American Studies with a minor in Arabic language and literature from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And she also has a degree in political science with a focus on peace and development studies from the University of Limerick in Ireland. So, as I said, I have purposely gone into detail about their biographies because their work in this panel are an important reminder that so much of the peace and conflict resolution that the Carter School embodies is engaged at the local or community level. We oftentimes think about, conflict management as something that's tied to the politics, the forces that are working to end violence, to end war, or to prevent violence. But it's always important to remind ourselves of the work that happens at the individual levels. What both Lujane and Lena are doing is really working to address what are often key drivers of conflict and often key obstacles to peace, particularly in their communities. Human rights, equity, dislocation, power imbalances, human trafficking, poverty, access to basic social needs, including just basic social well-being. That's where they're working, and they're doing so on the front lines. So the focus of their work and what we want to talk about in this session is really that community-based level in sort of how they engage in their communities. And then we'll sort of think about how what they're doing contributes more broadly to the goal of peacemaking. So with that, I'm going to stop, and I will turn over first to, I don't know if you guys decided who is going first, but I'll start with Lena, unless you have decided you're going to go in the other order. So take it away.
Okay, Jeff, thank you. Yes, I'm going to start. So give me a minute to share my screen, please. Let me know when you see this. Now, because yeah.
Yes, we can see that. Is there anybody who can't see the screen? I think we're good.
Okay. Thank you for your introduction. As Jeff told you, my name is Lina Guerrero. I'm from Bogota, the capital city of Colombia. And today I want to talk about the importance of the civil society organizations or grassroots organizations in Colombia, but in all the contexts that we know. Before I start to talk about the civil society organizations, I want to talk about the picture that you see in the first slide. I had the opportunity to work in a rural area, which is Tibú. It's a municipality in the north of the country, close to the Venezuela frontier. And I was there for almost 1 year and a half. It was the first time that I had the opportunity to work in a different context and not in a urban area. And there I realized how it looks the conflict. As you can see in that picture, people was wearing white t-shirts because they were trying to mobilize for peace. Because even when we signed the peace agreement, the war and the conflict still. So they were like trying to mobilize all the people, young people, women, etc., to prevent and to try to stop all the things that were happening there. And that was the first time that I realized that work with the civil society was really important. So to just have like a context, I want to let you know that Colombia is in South America. We have like more than 52 million people, 25% is young people. That means that it's like they have like less than 28 years old. And we have like 10% of Afro-Colombian people. And as you can see in the first picture, she's Francia Marquez, which is now our vice president. It's the first time that we have a Black woman on that position. So for us, it's something like huge and important. We have like 4% of indigenous groups around the country. And maybe we have like more than 100 different indigenous groups, and they speak more than 64 different languages around the country. And now we have like 3 million of migrants from Venezuela. And all of them are looking for the same. They're looking for opportunities to access to services as education and health, justice, empowerment, equity, and no repetition of the violence that they have to cross. So, as you know, and as I mentioned before, we already in 2016, we signed the peace agreement, and that's supposed to end the conflict in our country, but the conflict is still in Colombia. As you can see in this image or slide, we have like at least 4 big different groups operating in all the country. In some places there have more than one of those groups. And we also have like problems with mafias, like narco-traffickers, because they want the control of the territories, and also the coca crops around all the country. And that is just a picture of how it's going on in this moment in Colombia. And is that we're still being in a country with a conflict, and now with the problem of the migrants, the increase of the human rights violations is something that we have to deal with, and that's the importance to work with the civil society organizations and also grassroots organizations, because my experience, I think that it's really important to work the bottom up. And I want to talk about some of those people that are making change in our country, and there just are 3 or a couple of them, but I think that they have like their own stories, but at the same time they have like a lot of things to show us and to learn with them. So she is Maricel. She is a Colombian woman, and she was victim of displacement because the guerrilla. And she left the country, and she was living for, I don't know, like maybe 5 or more years in Venezuela. But because the situation there, she had to return to Colombia, and she had to start to from zero, like she has to make everything again. and she's living in a vulnerable neighborhood in Cucuta, which is a capital city of a department in the north of Colombia, with the frontier with Venezuela. And she's working with girls and adolescents to prevent the gender-based violence, but also human trafficking. And that's something really important because she's dreaming about how can she change the life of those girls and give them the opportunity to have access to education, for example, to different kind of works, but not to repeat all the poverty cycle that she is still living. So she has like that organization. The name is Princesas Guerreras, and if you traduce the meaning is warrior princess. And she has have been working with more than 200 different like girls around the city, and she's trying to empower them. He is a rural guy. His name, I don't remember his real name, but they call him Tomatero, which is like the tomato guy. And he was from another part of the country, and because the conflict, he had to leave his land, and he went to the Catatumbo region, which is one of the most dangerous regions in Colombia, and he was there. And that picture reflects the idea that he had to change, or he had like a dream of his farm. You know, like we made like an exercise with him because he was one of the 203,000 people that was part of the substitution program to leave the coca crops and try to make other things like have cocoa, yuca, melons, etc. And he was dreaming about how can he change his life and how can we start from the beginning. And we were working with him, trying to give him like the tools and the things or implements that he needed to start for the beginning. And here, that was maybe 2 years ago, we were with different organizations, representatives of different organizations from all around the country that were working with migrants, and they were trying to prevent the human rights violations, human trafficking, and gender-based violence. But also they were trying to put on the table things related with the politics and the laws that can help to make a better territory for the migrants from Venezuela. And we were all working together to try to think in something bigger that can change the life of that people. So we were trying to listen for the experience, the learnings, the methodologies, and was an important exercise because we try to build like a national network. That it means like a lot, but you also need like a lot of work to maintain and make them sustainable. And that's important because all of them are trying to transfer knowledge, but trying to keep in their mind the importance of the construction with the people. So here you can see like a picture of one of those leaders of those organizations that were working with kids to prevent the human trafficking through the theater. So he was using different tools to like be really close to those kids. And that organization could, how can I say that? Like could, I forgot the word. find like maybe 2 or 3 possible cases of human trafficking in their community. And now they are trying to use all those tools to promote integration, because like it's not just because there are migrants, there are also in the communities with people that used to have like a lot of problems, and most of them has to left their municipalities and move to other big cities to start their life from the beginning. So here there are a couple of pictures about the work that those organizations are doing in their territories. Just like someone that is working with them, but there are the actors, there are the important people that I want to show you, because thanks of them, they have like new opportunities. Those kids know their rights. People know all the like different tools to advocate. And also there are like a family, like they are in contact, they're still thinking how they can change the life of some of the people that are working with them. For example, just to mention one of those pictures, the first one, in the left, right on the top, there are women that are all from Venezuela. They never went to a school, they never went to a university, and they, like, if you go to their communities, they live in a bad conditions, but they still having that hope that they can just study, and they want to understand how to prevent the gender-based violence, and give all the tools to their communities to make their life better. So for me, that's something important, because we have the laws, we have the normativity, but them are making the change in their territories. So that's the reason, because I think that there are the roots, there are the people that know what they need. They have the ability to talk and use like a easy language to live the capacities in their communities, and they are also natural defenders of human rights. And that's the reason, because they can mobilize multiple social and community actors, and they can promote participation, integration, and solidarity. And of course, we have like a lot of challenges, but with my experience, we were trying, or I was trying to work, for example, to make more sustainable their initiatives or their organizations, to increase the technical capacities using simple language. And for example, as you can see there, in the first picture, I was trying to talk about gender with our rural community. And I remember that they were like, I don't understand, what are you talking about? And if you think about that, it's really different to talk about gender when you are in a big place, in a big city, but it's different when you are in a rural community, because the context is really different. So it's important to realize that and try to use like that easy language to make sense of what do you mean or what do you want. And also, in my last job, in Conectando Caminos por los Derechos, we had the opportunity to develop a tool called Henko, and was a guide for the grassroots organization to make like a strategic planning for them, because sometimes those leaders have like a huge ideas and they're big dreamers, but then when you have to put everything on the paper, you have to have a work plan or goals, is a little bit hard for them. So we were like trying to give them some exercise and some units with a lot of information, but in an easy way, to promote like that empowerment that they need. And also, we had the opportunity to work with networks, because it's better when the grassroots organization can be like connected, you know, like it's different when you are just one and when you are like 5, 6, 7 different organizations trying to defend the human rights, to prevent the conflict, to construct peace in their territories, because they can talk with the politicians in their communities, they can like speak a little bit loud about what is happening inside the communities. So in the second picture, we were like trying to put to make a campaign to prevent the human trafficking against children and teenagers in Cucuta. And we were working with the organizations which are part of the network. We were working with politicians, and also we were working with academic, and we made like a song, and we made like a lot of things, and it was like a good activity to promote that, you know, like trying to how can we increase the participation of people? How can we deal with all those problems to trying to make networks? So that was one of the exercises that we made, and was like really successful. And the other thing was use different tools as OPI, which is tool to know how is an organization and how can we make them better. So, for example, the lowest score is 8, but after working with them for more than 2 years, now they have like a score of 15 or 18 or something like that, and the highest is 32, but it's a good work for them because they know how it can deal with the problems and how can make them better. So I think that that was something really important that we can make with those organizations to prevent the human rights violations. But there are a couple of questions that I want to let in this panel, because maybe we can all together answer them, and also is the idea to be here in Carter School as a fellow. And I think that I don't want to read all of them, but I want to read two. The last one, which is how do we develop a capacity for constructive, direct, face-to-face interaction, and at the same time address systemic and structural change. And the other one is how can the academia transfer the knowledge into a simpler language for civil society organizations to use. Because I realize that sometimes we are thinking in something bigger, and we are thinking to make a structural change, but then when we are trying to work from the bottom to the up, it's a little bit harder. So the idea is try to design, or the idea is trying to adapt different tools that the Carter School have been working for a long time, and try to put it in an easy way, and try to transfer them to those organizations, and try to make a better place to live, and try just to put a little piece of sand. I don't know if that means sense in English, but in the Spanish does. And try to change the reality of some of those communities around the country. So thank you for the time.
Terrific. Thank you, Lena. And thank you for getting us started off in a way that really, I think, encapsulates how you frame the issues and the challenges that you are dealing with in your community. So I hope all of you begin to think of questions or ways of engaging Lena on this. Keep those in mind, and we'll now turn to Lujane to hear from her, and then we'll do come back to questions for both after that.
Hello, everyone. As the guest introduced us, I work in Jerusalem in poverty or social security industry. I'm interested in developing communities. That's why I work with this program. And I'll speak a little bit more about the program, and then I'll get into the Palestinian community in Jerusalem, the features, the challenges, and I hope I can describe it well from my experience. So, oops, just a second, let me share my screen.
Good.
Okay.
We can see it. Yeah, great.
Great. So the Family First program is a program suggested by suggested by the Ministry of Social Welfare besides GDC and Russia Foundation, and it's the first program that gives or addresses poverty problem in Israel. It's a national-wide program. It's applied in more than 113 cities. It gives services for more than 13,000 families. Nowadays it's more, because last year we added, I think, another 20 centers. And the main goal actually just to make a significant change in the family's life and try to break the poverty trap, because we understand that poverty is kind of a trap that families can't really get out of it. Communities in poverty can't make a change, they can't develop. So the program suggests kind of tools to make this significant change. We have three main components: a social worker, a family mentor, and a flexible budget. And by flexible, it's not about the amount, it's about who decides, and the person who decides over the budget are the families. The families decide what to do with the budget and how they use it. So actually the program was based on Michal Kromer-Nouveau book. She made a dissertation in her PhD about women in poverty, and she suggested that the state needs to address this problem with some values. Her first and main foundation, she sees poverty as a violation of the human rights, because the human rights and the UN, they kind of suggest the right of education, housing for every person, but they never speak about equal education and equal housing. When you don't have equality, you don't have the same opportunities, which can't offer the same opportunities for every person on earth. That's why it's a violation of human rights. And it's very important to mention these values, because when you think about a community, a whole entire community living in poverty, you'll ask, where can we implement these values? So the first value is we build our relationship on trust. We recognize the imbalance in the relationship and we try to decrease it. We acknowledge the importance of knowledge that the families have and their right to decide over themselves. We recognize the pain and the suffer in living in poverty. We recognize that the material and the emotional needs are interconnected. And we recognize that people are resisting poverty. They're not happy with the situation. They're not satisfied. They try to make a change. The question is if their resistance is seen as a resistance or not. And we have full solidarity with families based on that poverty is violation of human rights. And also we support politics of redistribution. That's the values, the main values that we follow in the program. So In the Family First programs, we have three kind of mini programs. They're different in their features, but they have the same values and the same principles. So the Family First is an intensive program with 20 families, 1 social worker, 1 mentor, and a flexible budget. The empowerment centers, they have bigger employees. We have 4 staff, a social worker managing the center, right exercising social worker, family budget mentor, career and employment mentor, and we serve 20 families. It's not limited by time, it's limited by budget, unfortunately. And the third program, Family First with Children at Risk, which aims to work with parents and to offer the children a safe place and not to take the children out of their houses. And this program is not available in East Jerusalem because the Jerusalem municipal decided that all the centers goes to the west of Jerusalem and not to the east, and you can see discrimination policies all over the years when they give the priority for the west and the Israelis part of the city instead for communities in need like the Palestinians. So this is the organizational structure of the program. And as you can see, it's the Ministry of Social Welfare, partners with the JDC and Rashi. They're Israelis. The coordinator from the ministry is Palestinian. And then the program is powered by nonprofit organizations all over the country. In Jerusalem district, it's Pamunim. It's fully Israeli organization. They have no experience in working with Palestinians. They never worked in the Palestinians community before. I am the coordinator. My employee is Pamunim, and the Pamunim decided to have a Palestinian coordinator for East Jerusalem only in 2020, after 6 years of starting the program in East Jerusalem. And we work in partners with the Jerusalem municipality. They're all Israelis. They have non-Palestinian staff within them. And East Jerusalem Regional Department are all Palestinians. Our centers, they sit in the social welfare offices, which are all Palestinians, and now this is our program. So you can see the distribution between the Israelis and the Palestinians who hold the power, who make the decisions, and the people on the ground are fully Palestinians. So this is the map of Jerusalem, and you can see the orange part is the Palestinian part of the city. They call it East Jerusalem. I don't think about it as East of Jerusalem. I think about it as community that starts from the north till the south part of the city. In all this part, it's not fully Palestinians. There is more, I think there's around 120 settlements in this area too, Israeli settlements. What else? I think we can move to the next one. As you can see, these points are checkpoints. So what happens, I will speak about the historical also background, but basically all of East Jerusalem has also part that is related to Jerusalem, but outside of the city. And what connects between this part and the city is checkpoints. Behind the checkpoints, usually there are Palestinian areas. They don't receive any services from the Israeli government. These kind of communities live in maximum poverty in a very hard infrastructure and very hard situation. They don't receive any services from the municipality. Okay, so some statistics. The Palestinian community is around 38% of the city population, around 360 people. 75. The percentage of poverty is 75%. 80% of the children live in poverty in Palestine, in East Jerusalem. Okay, some historical political highlights. So since 2000, Israel built the barrier between the Israel and the West Bank. Before that, Palestinians in East Jerusalem, and also Palestinians in the West Bank had the right of movement. They could move between the two parts easily without any checkpoints. What happened when they built the barrier? We have a lot of checkpoints, and the Palestinians from the West Bank are restricted. They can't enter Jerusalem unless they have a permit, which means we had an economic crisis because all the Palestinians are stayed in the West Bank. We don't have any movements. Family separations, we had a lot of mixed marriages, which meant that families which hold the Israeli residents had to move to Jerusalem, and the families with a Palestinian identity or residency, citizenship, had to stay in the West Bank. And we faced also housing crisis because thousands and thousands of Palestinians, they moved back to Jerusalem. We, as Palestinians in Jerusalem, we have no citizenship. Instead, we have Israeli travel document, it's limited, and Jordanian travel document is limited. We're not permitted to vote in national elections, and also we all know that elections is not also about political representation, it's also about economic decisions. Okay, also since 1967, 15,000 Palestinians have lost their Israeli residency. You can lose your residency easily by living abroad for 3 years or more, or by receiving a residency or citizenship of any other country, which means a lot of people, Palestinians who went to search opportunities abroad, they lost their residency, and also a lot of Palestinians who did not have the chance to come back, they lost their residency. We have the law of center of life. It's an Israeli law, which any residency holder, they need to approve that to prove they live within the Israeli borders, their work, their house, their life is within the Israeli borders. If Israel and the National Insurance Institute, unfortunately, is responsible for investigating the life of the residence people. If they discover that you live in the West Bank or abroad, they right away, they take your residency and you have no right to be living in Jerusalem. You need to move to abroad or to the West Bank. And also another big problem is the family reunification law. So as I mentioned before, we have a lot of mixed marriages between the West Bank and people from Jerusalem. I don't know if we should call it mixed marriages because we see each other as the same people. We're Palestinians. We used to live together and we used to be neighbors. But since one is holding a Israeli residency and the other is holding Palestinian citizenship, we call it mixed marriages. So what happens is when you, as a holder of Israeli residency, marry a Palestinian person, the law is not applied on you. You cannot apply for reunification. The law is frozen, and your partner will never get an ID. An Israeli ID. So that means there's a lot of also family separation, and a lot of people not prepared to marry from the Palestinians because of that, pulling Palestinians family apart. That's the result. Regarding planning and building, I think it's important to mention that since the foundation of Israel in 1948, there was no any new Palestinian city or neighborhood national-wide. They never built it, they never planned it, they only keep space reduction from any existing neighborhood or village, which means we're again facing a housing crisis, pushing all the Palestinians to live in the West Bank or in available, affordable places like the West Bank. Building permit takes 5 to 10 years and a massive amount of money, especially in East Jerusalem. We have massive amount of unlicensed housing facing demolition every day and high fines. After they demolish their house, they also fine you. So very interesting. I have an example of Aisawiya. Aisawiya is a village in Mount Scopus beside the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Aisawiya lost their more than 40% of their land to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and the rest part. Now 90% of the housing in Aisawiya are unlicensed, and every day they have demolition happening in the village. The Jerusalem municipality is responsible of demolishing the houses, and also the social services, which is part of the Israeli municipality, is responsible for suggesting services for these people. It's important to mention, I will tell you later why. Okay, so any person that has a property written in their name and they have been refugees in 1948 or 1967, it's called absentee properties, and it's now taken as a state property. Even if they have family members living in that house or living in their land, they will not get permission to do anything with the land. As I said before, it means housing crisis, family living in Palestine areas in the West Bank and not in Jerusalem, and losing their residency. So in total, you can see that policies are made to pull Palestinians apart and push them to the West Bank to leave Jerusalem. When we speak about the communities and the community facing these policies, we can see lack of confidence, lack of trusting the Israeli authorities. You have no any relationship of trusting, confidence, or even feeling that this authorities can come to represent me or to give me services. Lack of belonging. The situation is not normal, is abnormal. Being suspected as Palestinians all the time. There is non-cooperation between the Israeli authorities and the Palestinians, a lot of boycott movements, not participating in any events, and policies of Israelization since 2014. That's the policies that the Jerusalem municipality declared in 2014, that they will do all the Israelization in East Jerusalem, including education, language, and other things. When it comes to the community, from my experience and from a person who is from that community, I can tell that we live in survival mode every day. We have identity crisis, a skeptical society. We face othering, discrimination, and racism every day. Frustrated and desperate society, community. Significant power imbalance, lack of opportunities, not speaking the language, not even having an economic center, not having any way out of this situation. There is no political representation, collective identity, but forced to be individual, polar society, isolated community, complex political and geographical reality, oppressed identity and culture, and facing punishments when it's expressed. So we have basically no right to express that we're Palestinians or to express our political situation. When it comes to the staff that I work with, there's 3 important things that I need to mention. So the staff, because they're employees of the Jerusalem municipality, they are seen as representative of the Israeli authorities from the communities, providing services after crisis, like when the municipality demolish a house, they also go, the social workers, they reach the family and suggest services. So that's kind of a paradox that we live with. We have to deal with the police as social workers. We have to report the situation for the national insurance security, and sometimes we cause harm to the families that we don't want to cause it and we don't mean to cause it. Whole community living in poverty, lack of opportunities in education and employment, poor infrastructure, and lack of services. The staff, they question themselves, how can I help a family while I myself live and in poverty and I need help? Complex situation, we see job burnout, compassion fatigue, dilemma regarding the meaning of life and work in the staff. The management style, because East Jerusalem is now in kind of a development plan by the Israelis, they are in focus and constant investigation by the Israeli authorities, which mean authoritative management, skeptical about everything, defensive, and in fear of failing or facing any budget kind of a deduction. Complex reality, as I said, Palestine has no experience with the Palestinian community. The municipality itself, they're really afraid that the Palestinian would do any kind of demonstrations, so they're in focus and in complex relationship with us as external stakeholder, with the employees themselves, and with the ministry, and a lot of bureaucracy. So regarding some program values, as I've mentioned before, the values of the program are really very humanitarian and very valuable, but we live in oppression, and sometimes you ask, how can you implement such values when the state itself and who put these values that does not recognize that you're under oppression, does not recognize your voice and you suffer. So when it comes to right exercising, we're really limited. We cannot implement a lot of these values in East Jerusalem. And I think I talked about my job, implementing, adjusting, developing the staff, build a network, build partnership, regional program, and expand the program. And yes, we need radical hope to recognize the pain and the suffering, but also to aim for a better future. So that would be my conclusion.
Thank you very much, Jane. Radical hope. That's I think it's an appropriate way to end right there. Thank you both for really interesting presentations in helping us sort of understand how to frame the challenges that you face, the way in which conflict affects the communities you're in, framing it from that local perspective. And one of the things I find that you complement each other so much is that one has to start, the starting point has to be the individuals in the community that are affected by the dynamics, whether drivers of conflict, whether the broader political or security situation, the lack of rights, etc. That it starts with the individual in the community because they bear the brunt of the consequences. What we'll do now is go to questions or observations, and you can either raise your hand on the screen, or you can pose a question in the chat room. I'll kick it off while people think of and join in with questions they may have. The question that I suppose that I've had personally, and I've been fortunate to talk with both of you over the course of time. My question is, what's the biggest challenge that you face, each of you, that most of us wouldn't necessarily be aware of. Us being people that are not in Jerusalem or not in Colombia, but also a community of people that are fairly well aware of conflict and peace issues. But even still, what might be the biggest challenges that you face in the time you've spent with people from the Carter School that we might not have been aware of?
Okay, I'll go first. I think my biggest challenge is my mental health when it comes to my job. Because I work with Israelis, I'm seeing kind of like I betrayed my community from one hand, and a lot of people question how can I cooperate with occupation. From the other hand, in my perspective, the program is implemented. It's rather be implemented by Palestinian who knows how to direct things and implement it for the benefit of the people rather than an Israeli who does not have any sense about the community's need. But every day, I ask myself, what is the price that I'm paying today? There's every day this kind of dilemma inside of me. Am I serving my community or am I serving the occupation? And it takes a lot of training and a lot of understanding to be aware of what wins today, the community or did I serve the occupation more? And I think it's my biggest challenge to believe and to focus and to tell yourself, okay, this bridging between the Israelis and the Palestinian is somehow affecting. I know it's affecting because my colleagues are all Israelis, and I know that by reflecting the needs of the communities, I create some change in their state of mind. And I know by having this a big budget and big program, I know that I'm creating, even if it was a small changes in the Palestinian communities. So I know this bridging is very challenging, but I know I am making a change in both sides.
Right. Yeah, thank you. That's a lot of food for thought in your answer, and very interesting. Lena, how would you answer that question?
I think that one of the biggest challenges is try to let the capacities into the communities. Sometimes you think that you know everything and you can resolve everything, but you cannot understand the structure situation, the systemic situation in those local communities. And for me, it could be like, yes, like the idea to try to give them all the tools to let them try to stand for their rights. I think that that's the most important thing. Try to give them all the knowledge that they need to make their own life. Because sometimes, like people from the cities, for example, or people that have the opportunity to go to a university, we think that we have all the methodologies or all the knowledge that people need to have a better life. But I think that sometimes we also have to learn all them and try to build like a collective knowledge. So I think that that's a challenge that we have in the work with those communities.
Good, thank you. There's a question in the chat. I believe it's from Catalina Ramirez. She asks, which do you consider the starting point to address these situations? What is urgent and what can wait? That's a big question. And it's a question that I believe people dealing with such basic needs often face in many different contexts. How would either of you answer that question? What do you consider the starting point to address these situations? What is urgent and what can wait?
Okay, so I will try to answer. It's a big question, but when it comes to I'll speak about poverty because poverty is also a big problem. When it comes to poverty, I think the starting point is to understand that poverty is not the responsibility of the individual. It's policies that it's discriminated policies that created poor communities and give other communities better opportunities and better life. When it comes to the responsibility, so I say it's the state responsibility, there must be a policy changing, and that should be the major thing that we work on. But from the other hand, I don't think it's, from the other hand, we have individuals nowadays, they live in poverty. So we need to address this problem in their daily life too. So what I think we need to work in a couple of dimensions, layers. One that is individual, to address the individual and to help them to find their own way. And the other, we need also to work in a collective way with the individuals to try to make a policy changing and try to force some kind of redistribution in redistribution policy. What is urgent? They are all urgent. They are all urgent. The individuals that they now need help, and the policies that at the end of the day, they are creating more and more poor communities. I don't know if Lina would love something.
I don't know, like maybe I think that we need resources. And when I talk about resources, I don't talk just about. So I think that's something important. Okay, so for me it's important or maybe urgent to have the resources. I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about also technical resources to improve the capacities of those organizations. I think that if we think about sustainability, we have to work with them. And if we want to prevent the human rights violations, if we want to build peace in different environments, it's really important to have like, hello, it's important to have like those resources, you know, like sometimes we're thinking in the big picture, which means for me like the politics, the laws, democracy or the peace agreement or whatever. But if you think it's really important to put all those aspects in the local realities of the communities. So sometimes if you have, for example, the resources to give them the possibility to make like their own initiative and try to build something different into a local system, you can start to think about something bigger because you can create a network. So for me, answer to that deep question. I think that it's important to look for those resources, and something that can wait is try to make a cultural change, because like try to think about how can we deal with something that's bigger that, for example, happened in Palestine around what can I feel or how can I feel when I'm working with someone from Israel or someone that is Palestine is something bigger. You can it's something urgent, but you can deal with that in a short term of time. So I think that something important is to try to give some yes, opportunities to make something different in local or small context.
Great, thank you. Thank you both. Isabella asked a question when she says, what are some specific lessons or words that have that struck you the most when working alongside individuals on the ground? That is, are there things you've heard from the people that you worked with? Are there lessons in dealing with communities or people in conflict, or people that are being affected by poverty or discrimination or lack of access or rights? Are there particular lessons that you've learned?
Yeah, okay, I think that's something important. Is, for example, I'm gonna talk about an example that happened in Colombia, like in that region that I was talking about. And the government has a huge program, like an initiative, to do like a pork farm in some of those little towns in the Catatumbo region. And they just try to put together, I don't know, like maybe more than 100 women to work in the same initiative. But when they try to start to work together, was impossible because they don't know, they don't trust each other, and they don't have those capacities to make an initiative together. So when you don't have the opportunity to talk with people and to try to build something inside and in the local context, it's really hard to make something sustainable. And that happened, for example, when you are in the city, in your office, trying to make a proposal to, I don't know, I'm gonna say, to prevent the human trafficking, and you spend a lot of money in social media when people maybe don't have access to internet or they don't know how to use it. So this is really important. Like the most important thing is try to know what they need and how they deal with all those problems, and then you can like structure a good initiative or a good program or a good policy to make something different in the territories. So I think that that's the reason, because it's really important to work first in the ground and then try to work in something bigger.
Right.
If I may add to that, I think one of the biggest, I've learned a lot from the people. I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, that they do everything for a good reason. They have good reason and good explanation for everything. And when we can't see it, it means that we as professionals can't see it. It doesn't mean that they did something wrong. Acknowledging and knowing that they know what's better for them, what's good for them, they decide over themselves. It's one of the biggest challenge that the professionals face, because we think after learning, as Lena said, after learning a degree or two, you think you know what's better, you think how things work. No, the people know how things work in reality. The people know how to save themselves, how they can manipulate the policies and find a way out. And that was my biggest lesson, to listen and to understand that they have reasons, they know how to resist, they know what's good for them, and to be able to listen to that and admit that and let go of our professional ego and support them in this process was my biggest lesson.
Thank you. Both very powerful answers. We have just a couple of more minutes, so let me throw a very hard question at you, and maybe it's something you will answer in the future. But the question I would have is, when you go back to your community, what will be your first priority to change or to help bring about some degree of change?
I don't know, like it's too hard to answer that question because at least the join but I'm pretty sure that we don't work like just in one community. Like we work in a huge area with a lot of little communities. So try to think about just like one action is too hard to put it in that easy way. I think that more than that is try, for me at least, is try to have more tools, like try to understand in another way what means, for example, conflict resolution, and try to give to the people some of those tools that they can use to deal with their own problems. Because like I can have an idea to what I wanna do there, but at the same time, if you think about Colombia, work in the north is really different to if I work in the south of the country, or if I work with Afro-Colombian people, or if I work with indigenous people. So just have like try to have an idea, a main idea is impossible, at least for me to try to understand it. But I think that's something that I can think about and try to give to them is like maybe the opportunity to think about the conflict, for example, in a different way. And actually, I'm reading a book about transforming conflict. And it's really interesting because it's not to change the conflict, it's more than you have to think about how to deal with the conflict and see the conflict as an opportunity. And I think that it could be a good thing to all of those organizations, but not just because they have to work with people, but also because they have to deal with their own problems, as the mental health, of the sustainability, as the like different things that they have. So maybe that's the way that I can use all the things that I'm learning here, and I can put all the knowledge there.
Okay, so when I go back home, I have a personal kind of vision that maybe our problems as a community are very complex and very deep, but sometimes the solution you can give for individual is very simple. And I think as a Palestinian community in Jerusalem, we are kind of in a trap. We can't move forward. We kind of stuck in one place. because of our suffering and our pain. So what I want to do, despite where I will be working in poverty with youth, no matter where, I want first of all to allow a space of recognizing our pain and our suffer, and also admitting that we are under oppression and we're under occupation. And then as a next step, think of solutions and hope. Because I think we're stuck in the first step where we know we are under oppression and we recognize our suffer, but we don't see any hope. And what I want to give individuals opportunity to be seen, to be heard, and to see the hope, to see their skills, and to see their ability to make a change in their own lives. Maybe not in the community-wide range, but in their own lives. When they know what they have and their abilities, they can create a change. And what I want to do is allowing, kind of expanding the vision of the people to see that they can and they are able and they should dream and should have hope.
Very well stated, both of you. Mary Rodriguez has one last question to ask of you, Mina. And that is, was the handbook that you mentioned, is it available online?
It's not just online, but if you want, you can write your email and I can send you the toolkit to your email.
Okay. Yeah, Mary's actually in Colombia, and so I have her email and I will connect that to you. Okay. We're over time a little bit, but I think we owe you a great debt because both of you really helped ground the work of trying to affect the lives of people and community in an important peace building context. And I appreciate both of your last answers because what you bring to the work that you're engaged in, and understanding your audience and the need and your community is just such a critical, fundamental part of whether it's conflict resolution or peace building or development or human rights. That's very, very critical. So we've learned a lot from both of you, and the Carter School is much richer for your residency here and for your ideas and thoughts. Thank you all for joining us. And I hope you all have a chance to sit in on other sessions for Peace Week. And again, thank you both to Lujane and Lena.
Thank
Great.
you.
Bye-bye. Thank you all.